Yeah, hey, good morning, everyone, and welcome. I think it's 7:30 a.m. here in East Coast, 5 p.m. I think we are uh, all here to on a happy Friday evening there in India, and of course around noon in Britain or European time zone. So I have a privilege of hosting very two wonderful, or I what call them like career CISOs from one of the largest financial institutions in India, Mr. Samil Ratolikar, HDFC Bank, and same group CISO from Bombay Stock Exchange. So welcome Samir and Shivkumar. Yeah, so just to give a little bit background, I think the DPDA bill passed, and which was a pretty massive in terms of what you call happening in India, where with all the digitization like Aadhaar, UPI, and everywhere we are saying for 1.4 billion citizens, there is so much digital payments uh, and the infusion of technology in every walk of our life. So protecting that data of all citizens becomes absolutely important. And there is another aspect where India is a technology hub for pretty much every Fortune 1000 or most of the companies in the world. So it's a great what you call achievement and also kind of a responsible thing to do. So really happy to hear that. And I was thinking we did a little bit dive down into a law part of it in last LinkedIn Live a couple of weeks ago. So I thought one of the first impacted sector is banking, finance, insurance, and who to talk to, right? So welcome Samir and welcome Shivkumar. So
Hey,
Samir is
thank
being
you.
based, yeah, HDFC Bank. I don't think he needs both of actually Shivkumar or Samir needs introduction. But for global audience, I'll basically hand over to Samir. Just introduce yourself and then Shivkumar, and then we'll dive right into the topic.
Good morning and good evening, my friends who are joined from this part of the world. Thank you so much, Samir, for hosting me here. It's really a privilege to be with you. Guys, I am the CISO for HDFC Bank, and like any other CISO, manages the information and cyber security for HDFC Bank. We are world's fourth largest bank in terms of market capitalizations, and almost 95% of our transaction today operates on out of the digital channels. Almost, if I had to just take example of net and mobile banking, close to 12 to 13 crore of transactions volume on net and mobile happens through uh, these two channels in a month. So proudly, this all goes in a secured manner through the eyes of my team, and that's how we are. It's privileged to be
Yeah.
working in these big institutions. And thanks again, Samir, for inviting me to be on this panel.
Yeah, no, absolutely welcome. And I'm pretty sure there is a lot to learn from bank in terms of the whether it's technology or process. So another our second privileged guest, Shivkumar ji, please introduce yourself and tell us what's going on at BSC.
So, good evening, everyone, and good morning, Samir, and good evening, Samir. I mean, uh, see, I'm Shivkumar Pandey. I'm Group CISO from BSC. BSC comprises of the group company. When I'm saying we have a Bombay Stock Exchange, BSC Limited, we have a Indian ICCL, which is Indian Clearing Corporation Limited. We have international exchange also, international clearing houses also, and then we do BSc technology, BSc mutual fund. So you know, and if you talk about exchanges also, we deal with the commodity, currency, power exchange, equity exchange. So you can call as a universal exchange rather than only a exchange doing the trading only in the equity and all. Some of the numbers which I can, we per day volume is about 800 to 1000 million orders per day which we deal it, and we are one of the fastest stock exchange also. So this is what from my side.
Welcome, Shivkumar ji. And I think around 20 crore users, right? So it's not just about B2B, but so much data. And I think Asia's oldest stock exchange, I was
Yeah.
actually
So
just
we are
going to like,
150 years old company. So Asia's oldest stock exchange, and if you talk about the even number of companies, 5,500 companies are listed with us. So it's one of the largest in the yeah, in Asia.
yeah, absolutely. So let's dive into the topic. So when we talked about, or rather just heard the news, right, DPDA, and I think more and more details are actually coming, whether it's media or a lot of thought leadership from where the bill came in terms of that. And absolutely, privacy is a big topic. It has to be a business friendly. At the same time, it takes care of the data principles or data subjects or the customers slash citizens. So let's get your first reaction, right, from the CISO's angle, right? We definitely the roles will evolve and we'll dive into that data protection officer or chief privacy officer or compliance officer. What will- So I'll go to you, Shiv, and why don't you actually give us like first reaction when you actually have look at the bill and what are kind of like four large things which actually come to your mind as a CISO? Because see, privacy, security, you can have absolute security, right, without having privacy, but you cannot have privacy without having security. So, of course, DPO role is going to have a lot of importance, but eventually the implementation or there has to be a very close collaboration was going to happen, and it all depends, right? And that's a whole different kind of topic we'll dive into. But let us give your kind of overview from your the CISO hat, and then we'll go to Samir and get his perspective about the DPDA.
See, the passing of this act has been very good for, especially for India, and the organization. Now, at least we have some framework and act, and I'll give the some of the gist which I came to know from this act and all. Like, what is the purpose? So, right of the users. When I'm talking about the user, is all about data principal, or you can say call as a data owner. And the second is all about the data processor or data fiduciary. Now this bill is talking about the normal and significant. Right now we don't have a detail about what is a significant data fiduciary or not. I think the rule later on they will come with the notification, the rules, and then we have a much more detail on the same. Third thing which they talk about the penalties, which is up to 250 crores, but I'm not going in the same. But the main thing is that they concise, what I understanding is that what is the impact of the breach. And the second is whether it is a wrongful gain or wrongful losses on the same or not, or what is the volume of the data breaches, or whether the reasonable security practices and report has been taken by the data processor or not. So these are the some basic principle which they have guided on the penalties act and all. And very important thing, one thing is like now they come with the child consent, unset all, where the parent consent is required, which is 18 years below and all. So this is, and now so consent management is also become very very important, where they are talking about what is the data, what is the purpose, what is the time retention and duration and all. So I'm giving just a gist of the same, what is about this DPD bill. Maybe we have a more rules once they notified it, and so we'll get more details on the details on the same. But yes, now we have a some act which is, I know when it will be effective, from the still date is not there. But yes, it is very good for the organization and all. As you said, now it is not only for privacy part of DPDO, which anyway we'll talk on later. But I'm talking about now the role of even a CISO. I'm talking about what is their primary responsibility, which is the security aspect, even privacy security board, but even security aspect is going to be increase a lot. That's what I can say.
No, no, absolutely. And consent management is actually that's the whole basis of the law in terms of whether you have a consent to use that data or not. Yeah, and I think you come from more like a B2B or B2B2C, right? As an exchange, you hold a lot of data, but
So normally
eventually
we have a B2B a lot, B2B, but when we also become a regulators for member brokers or the broker family where,
stockbrokers and
so though,
yeah.
then they become B2C. So B2B, B2C, but finally most of the data is lies with us in our central, core systems.
Yeah, yeah. So moving on to Samir, right? I think B2C organization, I don't know how many customers or consumers data you have at SDFC. So give us your overview, right? That when it actually came in, right? What came to your overall, hey, these are the things I need to worry about most. So give your CISO perspective, right? That's what our session is all about. When the moment the bill landed and as actually the four different things like we earlier discussed, whether it's consent management, whether it's rights of data subjects, right? Whether it's a significant data fiduciary versus just a data fiduciary, and what you're gonna do. So give us your just in couple of minutes. What do you think about the bill and how it's gonna impact you, your role, your organization, and your customers and your employees?
Right. So finally, the baby is born, Samir. Right. That
Yeah,
is
we've been
the
talking about a lot for a while.
that is the reality right now. See,
Yeah,
the way
more
to look at
awaited
it
bills.
is the way to look at it is the bill has given a lot of empowerment to the common public, right? And by making them realize that data privacy is their fundamental right. Okay, let us take an example or analogy with a brick and mortar banking. In a brick and mortar banking, when I'm depositing say $100, okay, the bank is supposed to maintain the security of my amount by making sure that whenever I need the amount, I should get back in time, even though some percentage is lent as the as the lender, bank being the lender, right? But there is a security aspects in place. Now here the physical currency is replaced by the data. So when I am the custodian of the data, suppose you are giving your personal data to me, it's like you are giving your currency to me. I am supposed to make sure that I protect the currencies. I maintain the confidentiality. I maintain the secrecy of the entire currency, the digital currency, which is nothing but the data with me. And whenever you need your data back, you should be in a position to say that I need my data back, right? So I'm just trying to simplify the whole consent philosophy. So here, the data privacy bill, in certain extent, talks about this. If a organization is taking a data, the customer, the user of the data, which we call it as the subject, has to have a mechanism of telling me that, hey, please use the data for the intended purpose. There has to be a disclosure on your website in the form of a privacy notice. And when the purpose is solved, purge the data or give me a freedom to offboard myself along with the data, right? So the whole data centric philosophy is being brought by the data privacy principles. I think that is the one of the most important aspect out of this bill. Another important aspect, which I think more from the CISO or cybersecurity perspective, is today we are struggling in some sense to find out the data across the heterogeneous systems in a bank. Data privacy will sort of give you instrument to discover, identify the data, tag, label the data, map the data, right? And then put the access control, which is infosec control. So here the amalgamation of information security and data privacy will kick in, whereby the data which is lying with me, the private data, the secret data of my consumer, I am putting the appropriate, adequate security control to protect the confidentiality and secrecy of the data, right? So that is the way Samir will have to put it up. And I'm sure in the subsequent part of our discussion, we'll dwell little more on the technical aspect of it, or what should be the strategy or a thought process around that. But as of now, this is what my 2 cents.
Yeah, yeah, and very well put, right? I think the most important part of the bill is right to privacy for each and every consumer. And we did not have that, right? And we don't have that in the many of the places in the world yet, right? Gardner was saying that 65% of the population will be covered by some privacy bill, and I think this will actually pass that benchmark. But absolutely. But I think it's more about giving right services or their own rights as a bank, right? If you're a bank, but at the same time, their data is not for sale, right? And I think with all the infusion of social media and all kind of data collection, we are harvesting, or rather, the industry is harvesting so much personal data. So I think there has to be some teeth. So as we talked about the fines and all kind of teeth. So I think that fine is also a good way of having or forcing companies to actually have. Unfortunately,
Yeah, and there
the
is Samir.
compliance is a
Sorry to
business driver,
interject.
right?
Sorry to interject. There is also element of accidental data disclosure, right? So the obligation is on the institutions also to make sure that the data doesn't get breached, the data doesn't get disclosed, unwanted, wanted by any means.
Yeah, and there is a penalty for that, right? And that's
Yeah.
absolutely
Absolutely.
important.
So it's a pure responsibility of data processor or data fiduciary that they need to maintain the confidentiality of the data by anyhow.
And I think users deserve that, right? Overall, and I think there is a very gray area, right? That's why actually, if you see the my wallpaper in the back, right, security and privacy are not same, right? And a lot of times, I think within the security, I mean, we had a hard time, right? We came long way implementing security and asking people and other stakeholders to invest money in it, because it's always like insurance, right? It does not impact you right away, it impacts you in a longer term. So it's always the job of the CISOs and security engineers to convince, get budgets and all. But privacy even brings even more angle, right? So I always say, so if we have security was about protecting data, privacy is about being transparent and responsibly using that data. And I think that's really making all these organizations accountable. And it's also about consumer trust, right? If say data breaches are happening so frequently, right? So a lot of people are saying that, oh, my data is always out there. But I think there has to be some responsibility, and bills like this definitely bring. So let's dive into the role, right? How do we implement this and hold the role of data protection officer is coming up, and there are multiple ways organization, and there are like uh, depending on the structure of your organization, what actually makes it most effective. So I would like to get your thoughts, right, as these DPO roles are evolving. We call chief privacy officer here in US. In Europe, it's called data protection officer. I think in India also there is a very well defined that significant data fiduciaries have to have the DPO, which is actually local. And I think GDPR also has something similar to that. So, Samir, I'll go back to you, right, from the B2C organization with such a large customer base, in terms of how would you, how's the role of the DPO, right? So, it can be put in the various part of the organization. It may report to the legal, right? It may report to the CISO, it may report to the CFO, depending on, right, compliance function, if or chief risk officer. So what's your thought process, right? And one is from SDFC perspective, right? What your learnings are, and I think DPO actually organization is reporting to you. So I think CISO has gone through a lot of similar things in the past to convincing business owners. So I think that's a very natural fit. But different organizations have different cultures, different structures. So what's your thought process on that? That how the DPO role should evolve and get this or be fit within the organization?
See, privacy, Samir, is a control function, right? It's a risk function, and you have rightly said that it can be positioned, under anybody depending on the culture of the institution. In our bank, we realized, because culturally we are very risk focused institution, HDFC Bank. So here we have realized that it is important that the data privacy function be kept under CISO, because information security and data privacy are like twins. They need to go hand in hand. And whenever there is a technological angle, which of course there will be, because it cannot be simple data privacy run by the people and the processes. The technology has to play integral part of it. At that point in time, having a part of the information security will help in navigating that journey, right, little smoothly in comparison to the positioning under the legal or the compliance, where uh, the understanding and the executions probably could be little tedious, right? That is how it is positioned under me, as you have rightly said. Right now it is with me. Tomorrow, it may become an independent entity, or may there could be a dotted reporting to me. It's too early to comment, but right now it's working, and then the model is working fantastic. There's a great camaraderie, because any digital transformation which is happening in the bank, my data security and data privacy teams get together and make sure that there is a security and privacy elements embedded into any customer centric digital initiatives. So it's helping us, right? And that's how we have that's the way we are looking at it. Point number two, I think, in terms of the roles and responsibilities right now, is to just making sure that the consent architecture is built in the bank, so that uh, across all our customer facing digital properties, the consent management is in place, through a sort of a gatekeeper, which backends talk to our multiple other customer centric applications for all consent management, that is storing the consent, processing the consent, removing the consent, etc. Second important assignment given to the DPO is the data discovery part. Okay, making sure that you do a complete detailed data discovery, data visibility, and create a mapper, to at little, and that becomes a blueprint. What I need to know at the end of the day is what data is lying where and who has access to it. So it's complete data mapping sheet, data discovery, data visibility, sort of. That is the responsibility number two. Third responsibility is the data impact assessment, right? To do all the assessment of the areas of the departments or the units where the data is getting processed, right? So that is another important area. And fourth is the automation part of it. How the data uh, privacy elements or data protection elements, what is the impact assessment, how do we automate that so that we get the desired result, in the quickest possible time. So as of now, these are the four buckets which we have laid down for the DPO. It is evolving. Probably next, few months and a year, a couple of years down the line, you will have another paraphernalia getting added to the DPO portfolio, and that's how I think it will go to a maturity level.
And I think that's a wonderful insight. And one thing I want to comment there, right, from my experience being right from security engineering to basically whether it's auditing or how do you get done, right, in terms of the right security controls. I think security is a gatekeeper. So I see a lot of this data governance function within the CIO office, but eventually the security, the CISO or security office is a gatekeeper for that, right? And if that function is basically done by the IT, right, eventually you are the gatekeeper of IT. And if the all the tool stack, if you actually rely on IT to run that for you, I don't think that's basically a combination where you got to audit someone and they are actually running your tools and tech. But that's another big topic. But thank you for laying out those the discovery and know your data. Basically, I wrote an article called "Data Bill of Materials." So we have a bill of
Yeah,
materials for
absolutely.
everything, but the data, right? We have for table, chairs, we have for servers. But let's hear from Shivkumar how the DPO role is actually evolving in a large institution like you, right? And it has can have multiple angles to it, right? You have a lot of regulatory function for your stockbrokers or your sister entities where you actually serve. So, Shivji, tell me what do you think about the whole DPO role and for an organization like you, right? What are your thought process even within BSE? or in general, how organizations should handle, who do have a user or consumer data, but may not have a direct consumer. I mean, may not be directly responsible to the consumers, right? So what we call B2B2C. Please.
See, first of all, thanks for Samir. And more than the less, we are also on a similar kind of thing. But if you talk about organization, love, instead of financial institute, we calling as a fintech company because we are providing the platform to all the financial institutions, to do the trade and all. So we are more in the B2B kind of business and all. Coming to the DPO role, right now it is with the CISO team only, and it may be evolved. Like when you talk about CISO role itself is involved. Previously, it was a part of CIO team. Now we become the separate verticals, and from last I think 10 years, CISO and CISO role itself is evolved a lot. Similarly, I think the over the period of the time, the DPO role will also be evolved. Today, if you talk about data protection bill, which is even right now at the policy level, not on the rule level, which is yet to be notified, they himself is talking about the DPO need in significant procedure or significant data processor, they need the DPO role need to be responsible up to the board levels. And right now, CISO is the only guy who's also responsible up to the board levels or up to the top levels. So it is easier for them, as Samir said rightly. They are very tightly when you talk about security and privacy. So initial front in right now, if about today you talk about DPO role, I think most of the organization it is go along with the CISO's department, and then slowly it once the maturity is come, once you have a more details or more rule regulations, it will be evolved and maybe it will be report to some other function, maybe board level or maybe CRO or maybe on the legal side of the it. That's why that can. And second very important thing which he is also talking about, the how you can be started, like from data discovery is become very very important aspect, which we also just recently have started on the same. And not only data discovery, we talking about complete data lifecycle management, from origination of the data till up to the parsing of the data. And that's why the which include your consent management and other things also. These things become very very important. Right now it is on the initial stage, and though policies come out and now notification will become, so we have a more detail on the same.
So the closest, right, for all this, the closest work experience, I would say, right, for all this working with your data teams and everything, I think that's closest to the CISO. The legal function does have a very good insight into the law, but I think it eventually comes to the data, right? The entire privacy, where what data you have and how you handle and responsibly use that data, that's absolutely important. So I think both ways. But I think it will evolve as much as I want to get to actually a next point, which is a kind of very interesting in the Indian context. And let's talk about the privacy culture overall. And I had several conversation. I make frequent. I think every couple of months down there, I'm there. Right? So one of the fun conversation earlier came, right. Hey, privacy, right? Hey, why we care about privacy? We are so open people about, and I'm talking about the culture in India, right? So we like to talk about our family. We like to talk about our business. We gonna talk about this. So other than the regulatory aspect of it, right? Do we really care about? So I do really have an opinion on that in terms of, so as in India, right, where also I grew up. So we definitely are pretty open about. So privacy is very culture specific. Privacy means different things to different people, and some people may be little bit what you call discounted about few things, but not at. So if you see the biological privacy sector, right? So if you go into the culture mode of India, so our the culturally it's not shake hands, right? We do namaste. So what I call is even the touch in the society is a pretty private, if you see. But at the same time, when it comes to the social setting, we are very open about talking about the family, kids, and everything. If you go towards the other part of the world, right? So people, until they really know you, they're not gonna talk about or rather, we won't talk about, hey, what's your family, what's your job, right? People are very individual specific that when you're talking to someone. So I think it means different, but that does not mean that culturally we don't, right? I think there are certain aspect of privacy. So I think privacy is very culture specific, and I think the whole judgment which came up by the Supreme Court, that every Indian will have a right to privacy, and that actually kind of changed that context. But I think if you can give Samir and Shivkumar, starting with Shiv, what do you think about how it's going to change the culture, right? So technology part I can understand, but as a society, right? How do we respect our data? Because I think from the consumer perspective, there can be, you can throw just the $5 coupon or 5 rupee or 100 rupee coupon or some kind of, and people will give data like anything, right? And I think it's time for people, or rather everybody, or we as a society, to understand that once something is in digital world or internet, it's not coming back, right? So how it's going to change the culture overall? And I know this is more from the consumer perspective, but would love to hear like 1 minute from each of you. What do you think about the whole um, culture thing, how it's going to change the culture as a Indian citizen, consumers, customers, or whatever you call.
See, right now, Act just came. It is all about, first thing is, if you recall about the training and awareness, which is 360-degree approach. I'm talking about your customer as well. What is their rights? What is their fundamental rights, and other things which should be aware. What is the, the penalty they should be imposed when they do the wrongful, provide a wrongful information and all. And similarly, corporate like us, which is working as a significant data fiduciary or significant data processor, what is their role as reply. So these kind of training is required to, on especially on the private front, which we can provide, to your employees also, so that it will be more, they will understand, and which will build slowly over the period of the period. It will be, becomes in some kind of cultures, and slowly it will be evolved and matured also. If you talk about like cultures, one, you're talking about, employee awareness, customer awareness from their perspective. Second, even a technological perspective also, if you talk about data discovery will become into the picture, how to sharing the information, like protection of your information, masking, and encryption is become must now. It is like, and this, it is become consent management is become very important, important. So these kind of changes will become. So I'm not only, you're talking about customer side, organization, employee side, even a technology side. So cultural changes will be, there from all the angles.
Yeah, absolutely. Samir, what's your thought on that? Sorry, I'm reading questions while we are going on here, and we'll cover those little bit later.
No incremental thoughts, Samir and Shiv. Both of you, I think, covered the cultural aspects very well. I think culturally, we as a society is very different. So it is definitely going to take a lot of time for us in terms of understanding, evangelizing, and adopting to the core data privacy principles now. Uh, Probably the journey has begun, at least to a certain extent in the corporate world. I'm sure it will flow down to the governments, and eventually to the other areas gradually. But yes, I mean that's important activity which needs to be handled in parallel. And I think each one of us need to play that big role, as I said, in terms of as an evangelist, to make sure that the data privacy aspects are well understood by the people within our family, friends, relatives. And that is how I think we have to look at it. Data security, when it was sort of there in our country, say way back in 2001, 2002, till 2006, 7, I mean, it was fairly a very open market. IT security basic principles were treated as the information security. But it took time for the people to understand that the information security is not merely a technology or IT security, but is way different than that. Okay, uh, that's how that's a way to look at it. I think it's going to take time. Uh, the journey has begun now, and I think gradually, because of the digital transformations and other more visible um tools today's generation has, probably it will not take that much time as the infosec took.
Sure.
It will be fairly fast, but it is going to take still a fair amount of time.
Yeah, and I see a question there, and that's our right next topic, right? So, what about the technology, right? So, say for example, I know we have a lot of security leaders on the session, and will be eventually hearing to this. So, so from CISO's perspective, right, right now, what's on your mind in terms of, say, for example, what I need to do? So, I can basically summarize. So, first of all, you have to have some kind of impact assessment, risk assessment, DPIs or PIs. You talk about, and there is several technologies, consulting, or all kind of different help will be available, and I think that's number one step. And while you do that, of course, the data mapping and data discovery, I think both of you mentioned earlier, it's going to be a big deal, because I think the in this uh, whole digitization, I think data is too dispersed in terms of it's everywhere. And when you actually occur or look at any kind of data breaches, right, it's not that one place where you can keep all your data and you can basically keep that box at one place like your jewelry box. But the consumer data is everywhere, right? And when it's kind of aggregated, you get some kind of credit card numbers, names, and then CVV numbers and passwords and all kind of together. So aggregation, there is a larger risk. So even how do you store that data and get to know that data is absolutely important. But I would like to hear from you, right? Of course, we deal with that on day-to-day basis. Know your data in the best, or rather the fastest way possible, is going to be a challenge in terms of you may have some legacy or earlier tools where you had done that, but now it will become actually a more prevalent than data flow, how data is moving across the organization, and also the consent and piece. But Samir, what is the first like kind of technology tool set which you are thinking of, or what CISOs, right, or all security leaders basically think about when they want to actually start implementing? I know we're going to get some time, but what they should prioritize versus what eventually they can do over the period of time.
Well, the first step, in my view, would be a data bomb, data bill of material, which needs to be prepared, because then that will give you a visibility, or as I said, what data is lying where, who has access to it, data, what is from where the data got generated, etc., etc. So the data bill of material, data discovery is, in my view, is a fundamental step to begin the journey for the data privacy implementation or strategizing the data privacy. Second, of course, would be the data impact assessment to find out what are the various processes where the data is getting generated and processed, and what is the impact, and putting the controls around that. Third aspect is, of course, going to be the consent management architecture, whereby the entire consent management is automated. The fourth aspect are the surrounding areas. Of course, is the making sure that the data does not get stored in the log files. So, which is, in my view, the way I would term it as the hygiene stuff, right? So
Right.
certain hygiene aspects also we need to take care of in terms of data privacy in the log files and various other systems. So these are, I think, three or four fundamental steps in my view, which would set at least some foundation layer for data privacy in any organization.
Yeah, I just would like to, before I forget, right, data minimization, right? If we can control that either at the
Yeah,
storage layer,
absolutely.
or we
No,
can
absolutely. I
basically even
think.
at the capture layer, right, where we
Yeah,
actually,
yeah.
when we collect data.
No, no,
I don't
absolutely.
think we had any restriction earlier, right? So thus I want basically whatever data, but why you need address, why you need Aadhaar number, why you need
No, no,
social
absolutely.
security number here, or whatever the personal data. So I think there has to be a legit purpose, and that purpose, I think, purpose identification is absolutely important. And less you store, I think less you are responsible for. But Shivkumarji, let me know. I mean, in terms of what do you think in terms of the technology side? And what are your discussions, or how will you guide the security leaders to actually um, thinking about when it comes to a technology tool set, or even basically the process, right? Whatever we call people, process, technology, but what they should do, like first, like one, two, three steps from
See,
your perspective.
Samir already talked about most of the tools, but I'll just mention it's we also start from data discovery, identification of the asset is become very very important. So, and all this technology, when you're talking about looking the size of the organization, automation becomes a very very important role. So in all the technology, if you talk about, so from data security, as you talk about, second is a data security or data protection, third is talk about the consent management. So you require all this. One thing which I will just like to add is the grievance systems. That to also play a very, because you require grievance system to address your customers requirement all. Even you require notification tool, audit tool, these kind of things is also you required in your systems and all, which become very very important. That's what I can say.
Yeah. Yeah, and I see there was a question overall, right? I mean, why legal aspect versus the technology aspect, right? And why should we basically put CISOs on for legal interpretation of the law? And I do have I mean, I think we talk about a lot when we are at the forums, various privacy forums. So I think this whole privacy and technology, they have to merge together, right? And we all need to come together with, whether it's lawyers, right, who are very well in understanding and interpreting law, but at the same time they need a lot of technology perspective, that how that data is basically stored, used, and all that. And I think the techno privacy is a very techno legal function. So
Absolutely.
CISOs needs to understand
Yes.
what the law says, right? Of course they are not responsible for interpreting it, but at the same time, unless we understand the crux of it,
Samir,
that
Samir, if I talk about in any organization, privacy who can understand very well or is the only today's environment is the CISO function, who is very close to this requirement and who understand this requirement very well. Tomorrow maybe it's a maturity or maybe it's a evolved, maybe a different function. But if you talk about right now at the initial stage, yes, it is the CISO function only who understand very closely with this.
yeah. I know there are a lot of questions, so I think we will get into that because I think we are almost at the 45 minutes of the hour. So let's cover some questions here, right? In terms of various, and I will try to consolidate those. Where so
And my
what kind
one
of
suggestion,
solutions?
Samir,
Hmm.
one my suggestion is those questions which, I mean, all of the questions are very interesting and very thought provoking. So even if because of the paucity of time, we may not be able to respond to everyone, but everyone, at least after this call, needs to be responded, via email.
Yeah, yeah. No, no, we
Right?
do have a networking in that event section, so we will actually make sure that every question is kind of answered. Or so I think there was one question I think we can take, and I think if you are open to it, we can take more 5 minutes going through in terms of at least taking one or two. There is a lot of about ROPA, right? So one person was asking here, right, record of processing activity, which is a GDPR concept, and law does not specifically say ROPA, but I think data inventory is absolutely important. And record of processing activities, that what records are you storing and how you are processing it. So I think it's kind of given within that. I don't think it actually says in that context, but I think further in the rules, it will eventually come up overall. But as far as question, and I'm trying to consolidate, it's kind of a tough job, but how do we classify personal data, as GDPR is specific to the personal data? So one user is asking there. So I think data classification may be a good area, or kind of a good topic to talk about at the from both of you. So tell me how you're gonna deal with that, right? What is personal data and what is not, right, within the legal norm? So what are your primary thought? I know there is it's a pretty large topic and overall. But at least from your perspective, how you gonna deal with the technology aspect of data classification or labeling or tagging, whatever way you call it, in terms of the privacy? Starting with you, Shivji or Samir,
I think
anybody
I
can take
think
it.
it's, if I'm not wrong, data classification is a part of data protection and impact assessment itself only. So you will start, from in data discovery. After doing a discovery, as I said, you require to do the data protection impact assessment and all. So and where you need to first, you also work on the data classification and all. And there are lots of tools are available, technologies are available who do the data classification, whether data is rest or data is in motion or data is in use, depending upon the policy defined by the your organization and all. And so and that's why you can, after with the after classification and data protection impact assessment, then you start deploy this kind of technology to protect your data.
So, Samir, you wanna talk a little bit about
No, I
that?
think incrementally, nothing much. But yes, uh, perhaps what is missing today about the data classification is a part of the machine learning, or to a certain extent the behavioral or the psychological aspects, because when the data gets generated, we would need the systems to be able to identify if the data contains the personally identifiable information, PIIs, and basis that the system should be able to trigger the categorizations or classification labels. And if a person chooses a wrong label, the system should be able to identify and force the user to that. So I think that is perhaps, I mean, I know it's little early. It probably in the days to come, the thought process or the technology move in that direction. But that is, I think, the going to be the need of the hour, to make sure that there won't be any data misuse, and the people who have genuine access to the data is actually using the data only for the intended purpose.
But
Absolutely.
just I would like to add, even data changes, notification is also become very, very important aspect. If you talk about the technology person, notification to the users, if data is anything changed or not done. So these, see, there's so many technology will come into the pictures when you talk about. Today we are thinking about 4 5 major technology, but as I Samir said, mature, once the we there should be some maturity, or how we are in future we evolve, or while implementing also we'll come to know so many things is required.
Yeah, and I think the prioritization is gonna be a big deal, right? So I don't think the volumes of data are so humongous, and the prioritization is absolutely important overall. I think we can capture that at the inception phase. I think that would be very ideal case. But there is a lot of legacy data out there, right? What we're gonna do about that, especially the large and old organizations, or rather very mature organizations like you. But I know pretty much we can go on and go on. I want to be respectful of your time doing one of the most important job out there. So I will basically have a kind of closing comment in terms of. So first of all, thank you so much for attending this session. I know we're gonna do more and more session diving into a topic wherever we can actually bring some industry expertise and kind of thought process. It's still early to do. I think it will be eventually followed through the rules. So thank you very much for attending. And we will be responding to the questions on that networking tab of LinkedIn. But as far as the session for closing comments, Samir, how do you want to close the session? So in terms of your final thought.
No, I think it's very heartwarming to see the participation by the people, and especially the questions they have posed to all of us. I think there is the future is definitely bright, more empowered for all of us. I think let us adopt that, and let us try to sort of innovate more and bring the entire society into the aspects of data privacy, at the same time not making the obstruction to the business, etc., but by enabling the business to drive their digital transformation by having the security and data privacy as the integral and embedded elements. And that's where the leadership comes in. That's where the positive way of working comes in. That's where the risk appetite comes in. Uh, that's where the coordination, engagement, collaboration plays a very important role. So let us collaborate with each other. Let us, be in touch with each other to take this journey to the next level. Thank you
Thank
so
you so
much.
much for your wonderful insight and actually a time commitment for this, Samir. Shivkumar, what's your closing thought on this?
I think it's the most awaited bill, and I would just like to add on Samir thing. It's protect our fundamental rights, especially awareness on the privacy, your data, and I think it's a very good initiative. That's what I can say, and uh, let's see how it can be evolved in the
Yeah,
system.
respect. Yeah, respect each other's data, right? We respect each
Yes.
other. So I think that's what the whole privacy is all about. Hey, thank you so much for getting your insight. We hope to do more, rather in person or on the live. I think, especially on the days like this. So everybody have a wonderful weekend. We have a long weekend here. So people are on this side of the world have a wonderful long weekend. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you. Pleasure meeting all of
Thanks,
you.
Samir.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Samir. Yeah.
Yeah, bye bye.